Julio Jones just retired, but where does he rank among all-time greats at receiver? Julio Jones, legendary wide receiver in the NFL, announced his official retirement. I thought that this was quite funny because I could have sworn he was retired because he hadn't been playing, but he officially announces it. He retires as the 16th all-time leader in receiving yards with 13,703 yards, 61st in receiving touchdowns with 66, and then 27th in receptions with 914. He didn't have a 4-year career. He had a long career playing for 4 different teams: the Atlanta Falcons, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Tennessee Titans, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, I'm just going to let you just do what you got to get out before we get to the real question that I'm sure is going to anger you, but just go ahead. Unload.
I'm not sure what that question could be since we're speaking of maybe the second greatest receiver of all time.
Oh, you're out of your damn mind.
Behind Jerry Rice and Jerry Rice alone.
Okay. Before we get to that, can you just – I'm giving you the floor uninterrupted.
Doesn't feel like I have it.
Giving you the floor uninterrupted to
Happy retirement. Happy retirement, King. The athletic ability, the maturity off the field, dealing with all types of football shenanigans and never uttering a word, having defensive backs like Patrick Peterson try to chirp you and get in your ear before games, and then busting their ass for 4 quarters is something you did routinely. Never took the bait. It on every single defensive back in the NFC South for a decade. The battles with Marshawn Lattimore were stellar. You destroying Carolina every time you played them. Fantastic. The Buccaneers was the Buccaneers. You were kind of in the middle of the road there, but that was still greatness, still averaging about 91 yards per game, which before the career fall off, he probably would have averaged most career yards per game had he retired before that Tennessee season, which was rough, and before some of the Philly and Buccaneers years. But even in the later stages, let it be known, Joseph, that his supreme athletic ability in his mid-30s, late 30s, was still a contributor, still a guy that Tom Brady was looking to go to. In those final playoff promos that at Tom Brady's last run in Tampa, they were highlighting Julio Jones as being a premier target for the guy. He
was a recognizable name for the average mouth breather who didn't really pay attention to the NFL.
Scored a touchdown in the playoffs with that Bucs team. A guy
299 yards with the Bucs that year. Let's calm that down.
I thought it was
a
my
little bit.
floor.
Well, when you're saying crazy shit, I get to interrupt you.
One bad hamstring away from being arguably the greatest receiver of all time, definitely the greatest in the modern age. But yeah, had a hammy thing. That's the only drawback I have for Julio Jones for the rest of my life. My favorite receiver of all time, my favorite athlete of all time, announced his retirement. I am sick to my stomach that has happened. I love the outpouring of love. He was
35. Let's not say 36, actually. I think he's almost 36.
I well understand that. Him doing it on 404 day, him showing love to Matt Ryan and the Falcons organization. Great. I know they went out not on the best terms. That happens. He's not the first athlete to go out on not great terms with the team that drafted him and was the team for the majority of his career, but he still showed love to Atlanta. Atlanta still loves him. I still love him. And there's nobody in the modern age of receivers past Rice that I would take on the outside over Julio Jones. And that's Megatron, that's Antonio Brown, that's anybody. That's Hines Ward, whoever your GOAT is, Marvin Harrison. They don't hold a candle to number 11, JJ in the A. They don't touch him. He's the best that we have been alive to see.
He was, of course, a legend, too. You can't forget about how great he was with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2023.
Elite receiver aesthetic with the Eagles also.
An amazing season that he had there in Philadelphia. 74 yards. He did have 3 touchdowns. Good for him. Ryan points out a really fun stat, though. He has the same amount of 10 touchdown seasons as Brandon Lloyd of all wide receivers.
Julio Jones has the most 250-yard games in NFL history.
1 10 touchdown season. Oh, look, I'm not knocking Julio. I mean, Julio has been supremely talented, and for a brief spurt, let's call it from 2014 to 2019, he was minimum top 2 receiver in the NFL, was consistently the best receiver for periods of time through that stretch. But I'm not going to – he's not top 5. He's not top 5.
Top 5 what?
Wide receivers of all time. Huh. He's not top 5.
Oh, excuse me?
Jerry Rice, T.O., Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald. They all rank higher than him.
That's 4 people
in most statistical categories.
That's 4 players.
Marvin Harrison Sr.
Yeah. Julio's better than Marvin Harrison.
Tim Brown.
Better than Tim Brown. I think he's better than
Chris
T.O.
Carter.
Better than Chris Carter.
Here's my problem is that if he didn't fall off a cliff so aggressively the way that he did when he turned 31, I think our perception of him would have been completely different. Nobody's catching Jerry Rice because Jerry Rice is one of those just few rare dudes that just played at the same level every single year, even until the end of his career, basically, and just kept playing way longer than anyone capably could have. But the problem with Julio is that he was such a height, weight, speed freak that by the time that he got towards the end of his career and he started to lose a little bit of that burst was why we saw that 4-year stretch where he didn't get over 1,000 yards.
He didn't lose burst, though, Joe.
He did.
No, he was still burning in Tampa and Philly. He just had a bad hammy. He still had that burst.
He was still a great player.
Let it be known he never lost the burst or physicality.
He wasn't
just
that
had a bad hammy.
Athletic freak that he once. Well, I would argue if you have a bad hammy, you're not as bursty dominant as you were.
Then that's the reason. It's not because he just lost it. He didn't lose it. He was always Julio
he couldn't
Jones.
access it because he was. It's like saying that you've got a Corvette that can go 200 miles an hour if you like really picked up steam, but the engine's been messed up for 3 years, and it's like, yeah, no, it's still got that in there, but the engine's broken and it can only go 90 on the highway.
Ryan's got a good top 5 here: Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, T.O., Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald. Sub out T.O. for Julio, and we got a perfect top 5.
T.O. has one of the most decorated careers ever for a receiver.
Who'd you sub out then?
How often are you sitting here thinking about? I would put Julio at 6.
Also, if we're talking about like career flameouts, we could talk about T.O. going from team to team to team to team to team and doing nothing. What do you mean from doing? Hold on one second.
I led this in by pointing out where he ranks among all of those statistical categories. He's 16th in all-time in yards, 61st in touchdowns, 27th in receptions. He's not even top 10 in any of those categories. He has one of the single greatest seasons of all time when he had the 1,800 yards, which was incredible. But at the same time, he doesn't have that longevity. Calvin Johnson played way less seasons than he did and has 2,000 less receiving yards and has more receiving touchdowns. That's the crazy part about that.
Yeah. Oh God, sorry that Atlanta had a couple running backs that could get in the end zone. Detroit, you're one guy that could get into the end zone.
Oh, come on. That's revisionist history.
That's not revisionist.
That's revisionist history.
That's adding context to the situation.
That's revisionist
Julio
history.
didn't necessarily get in the end zone all the time, but he had walk-off wins. He had defining moments as a player. What's T.O.'s defining moment? He broke his leg.
T.O. had a 1,000-yard receiving at the age of 35. At 37 years old, he had 983 yards. He has the longevity.
The DBs now, and I'm doing it, and this is a first take. The DBs now would have had
2010.
They would have had T.O. in a chokehold.
What are you talking about?
Give me a break.
Oh my God.
T.O. was burning DBs before they learned how to play DB, when they were just wide receivers that were getting converted. Like the way that the cornerback position developed in the 2010s while Julio was playing was a direct result of Julio Jones. And by the way, all the guys that Julio was competing with for like the one spot of the 2010s in which Julio is the best receiver of that decade all fell off. Des Bryant thought he was going to be, no, he fell off. Antonio Brown, he fell off. AJ Green, worse fall off than Julio. All the guys that he was dueling with, no more. They're a whisper in the rear view mirror 2 miles back compared to what he ended with.
Okay, but hold on. I haven't mentioned any of those guys in the conversation. Julio is obviously the best receiver from his decade. The 2010s, he is the best.
So then he's better than Calvin.
No, he's not better than Calvin. Never mind. Never mind. Well, yeah, because wait, what year was Calvin Johnson? If my timeline of when Calvin Johnson was in the NFL and when
2007 he was drafted. It was either 2007 or 2008. One of the two. He might have gone before Matt Ryan in 2008.
Calvin Johnson was still better than Julio Jones.
He was I'm not. Here's the tricky part, because I don't want to get in a situation where I'm running down Calvin Johnson and calling him a one-trick pony, which he isn't. He could run routes. He was strong. He was fast. He could do the jump ball thing. I'm not going to run him down. Okay. That's not fair to Calvin Johnson. But Calvin Johnson's route bag was nowhere close to as good as Julio Jones's route bag. You see the way that players talk about him. He could run every single route. He wasn't a one-trick pony. He didn't have a
wasn't a one-trick pony.
Jump ball Calvin. Calvin's down there somewhere.
No.
Yeah, technically, he was a one-trick pony for how we remember him. Julio Jones, we remember him as a dazzling receiver that could do literally everything. Screens, deep ball, intermediate work. He did it all top to bottom.
Well, I'm glad that I sparked this debate with you. Here's a really disturbing fact, actually. Julio might not even be better than DeAndre Hopkins, who is still playing, who is 32 years old and has almost 13,000 receiving yards, has more overall
What's D-Hop's
receptions.
what's his signature moment? What are you going to remember D-Hop for? Breaking D'Angelo Hall's ankles in a summer training camp practice? What do you remember
he has more
for
receptions
D-Hop?
and touchdowns, and he's still playing, and he's younger than him. I mean, there were some stretches where the Texans were dog shit, and he was the only reason why they had any relevance.
You're even missing the only one, and it's the Hail Mary in Arizona. That's the only thing that D-Hop did that's really rememberable. That's really remarkable, aside from being DeAndre Hopkins, who's a very good wide receiver.
Okay. Julio obviously has some remarkable moments, and he has some of the craziest highlights, especially the chase downs that he has. It's comedic to watch him do it, but he has some incredibly important plays in the history of the Atlanta Falcons and their success. But if he had not fallen off the way that he did when he turned 31, I think that our conversation, the way that we'd be talking about him, would be completely different.
I still reject the way that you're introducing that like he had fallen off. He had a hammy issue.
That's a fall off. An injury availability is important.
I'd rather you lead it in
about
with
injuries
Julio,
all the time, and now all of a sudden
Julio had a hamstring thing, and that prevented him from becoming the best wide receiver
of all
time.
Off.
You're trying to find
a bad
some
hamstring
validation.
on a receiver for 3 seasons is a fall off.
You're pre-validating a non-top 5 argument without really laying it out that if his hammy was fine, then he would have.
He might not even be top 10, Sean. He might I actually almost came in here thinking he might be 10th. He might be 10th.
You're a crazy person. This is just
DeAndre
not a sane
Hopkins
argument.
has better numbers than him.
What has DeAndre Hopkins ever done? What's the impact play? What is it? Did he make a fantastic toe tap catch in the Super Bowl and do everything he needed to do that? Or how about the week before in the NFC Championship game where he goes for 180 and 2 touchdowns, takes over the game, and beats the absolute world-stomping Packers, almost all on his shoulders? How about the 300-yard game against Carolina? Who's the last receiver that's had 300 yards, Joe? Can you remember it?
Hold on.
It's Julio Jones.
Hold on. My biggest problem that when we get into these greatest of all time discussions is trying to separate the game-by-game success and the game-by-game impact from the consistent career success. Because there's been plenty of people in the history of the sport that have been freakishly dominant and were some of the best to ever grace the field at their individual positions in terms of athleticism, all of those things. The easiest example is Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson, not from a standpoint of career success, he is the greatest running back to ever play from a physical profile. But because he got banged up, he'll never be in that conversation. He never even will touch the top 50 of that conversation because he didn't have enough stats to actually mold the two things together. Julio was phenomenal. I'm kind of giving you shit and getting under your skin here by saying he's not top 10. He's top 10 in my eyes. I think that he's 6th or 7th or 8th. But I see a lot of guys that were physically gifted and then also stacked a ton of crazy seasons. Randy Moss has to go over him for this debate of is he the second best receiver of all time.
I'm not leaving Randy Moss out of my top 5.
But he's number 2. Statistically, he leads in far more categories than Julio does. It's really weird.
What did Randy do? Randy had the Thanksgiving performance. Randy burnt a bunch of time in Oakland. He was great with the Vikings. He got saved by Tom Brady and the Patriots. And then what happened after that? He went to Tennessee.
Okay, he had one of the craziest strings.
Mark's being absolutely ridiculous here. Isaac Bruce, no, and I love Isaac Bruce. Reggie Wayne is nuts. Irving Fryer, you're not even speaking real, Mark. And Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is not even in a realistic conversation either. Are you kidding me?
If I said Fred Biletnikoff, how pissed off would you have gotten?
I'd respect that you're bringing up Fred, but Fred was also playing when Stickum was allowed not allowed, but they were using Stickum with the Raiders.
The same time frame that I illustrated that Julio was one of the best receivers in the league. This was Randy Moss's stretch from his first first year in his career in 1998, he had 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards, 1,400, 1,200, 1,300, 1,600. Now, he didn't have that same ceiling of that insane 1,800-yard receiving season that he did. But on top of this, Randy Moss also had crazy receiving touchdown years where he had 17 in 1998, he had 15 in 2000, 17 in 2003, and then the 23 that he had in 2007, as well as when he was 32, he still had 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns in 2009 with the Patriots before he suffered his career fall off. But his impact started a lot earlier, and it was a lot more continuous, minus the 1 year in 2004 with his last year with Minnesota. You have to at least concede that Randy Moss, who was also physically dominant and also consistently successful, was better than Julio.
Randy Moss was a one of one, but Randy Moss didn't average over 90 yards a game for 6 straight years. And by the way, four of those 6 years, Julio was over 100. Maybe it was 7 years. Yeah. Looking at it now. 7 years straight over 90 yards a game, which would be an NFL record if he had clipped it after that. He would hold that record of being the most consistent wide receiver. Most consistent, most dominant. You don't just stumble across 116 yards a game.
I know who Irving Fryer is, Ryan. Sorry. Julio or Mike Evans? Julio's better than Mike Evans. I'm not doing. That one I'm not entertaining.
Here's the thing. We can use statistics to prove every argument right. Homer Simpson made that statement in the 90s. It's true. But when you really know something, I don't know, I think it was like season 4.
Okay.
You look up Homer Simpson quote on statistics.
I'm not questioning if that was a real quote or not, but that's hilarious.
But when we decide to actually feel who's a top 5 guy, Julio's a top 5 guy. He's a number 2 guy for me all time. For others, he could be a 6, a 7, an 8, like you said. But when we're being real objective and thinking about it without trying to make some yards per game, receptions, yards standpoint, Julio's a top 5 receiver of all time.
Top five.
If we really start working through it,
okay,
he's a top 5 guy. You don't just leave Julio Jones off that list when you start thinking about it. He's got too much of a strong defense contingency.
I don't believe he is top 5, but I will not get upset at you for putting him top 5. But I will get upset at you is considering him top 2, the second best receiver of all time, when Randy Moss and T.O. have better arguments against him. They have better arguments for being in that debate of being the second best receiver of all time.
I wouldn't say so. As a full NFL football player, all that, Julio never had any issues. He was never in the media. He was never in the spotlight. He was a perfect football player,
Joe.
Because
Randy Moss moved the crowd, he's not allowed to be considered.
Because you know who number 1 is?
They're
Jerry Rice, who is a perfect player.
It's always about being a diva. We talk about this all the time.
These guys, Randy Moss
are obsessed with themselves.
Randy Moss and T.O. made that position a diva position, and Julio Jones didn't take the bait. He didn't take the bait.
Good for him for being quiet. Maybe if he was a little bit more of a diva, he would have lasted a little bit longer.
No. That is not the point of the case whatsoever. But if we're putting full career trajectory, full everything on it, Julio Jones is a perfect football player. Genuinely a perfect football player.
He was
a bad
amazing
hammy, other than that,
player.
a perfect football player.
Tim Tebow was a real church mouse.
When was the one time outside of rookie year? Outside of rookie year versus Houston, where he had a Hail Mary in the end zone to possibly tie up the game and win it. He dropped it. It hit him in the chest. Outside of that, I can't think of a play where I'm like, Julio made a mistake. Even when he slipped and fell in the end zone in 2017 versus the Eagles on that stupid bootleg outright. Like, we're going to bootleg with Matt Ryan. Even when he slipped and fell, got up, he still almost hit it, and Matt overthrew him. There's just not, Julio just doesn't make mistakes for the team.
I understand all this. And you're making strong answers for describing why he's a top 10 receiver of all time, and despite not having the stats of somebody who would be in the top 10 of all time. But him to be considered second behind, over, I can't freaking talk today, over Randy Moss, that's not happening.
Randy Moss wasn't a perfect football player, and that's not knocking him, but Julio was.
Are we ranking receivers based on who was the nicest guy off the field, or are we ranking them based
I never said Julio Jones was nice. I said he was perfect.
All right, we're going to move on here.
Gavin's a problem also.
I'm
sure Gavin.
All right, we can't do that.
Jamar and Jay Jetta's got another 6 years before they can start sniffing that Julio territory. They're having a good stint. It's a fun run. I wish, Gavin. You wish.
No Kirk guys. That's not allowed. I hate when people do that in those arguments. Sorry, Gavin. We can't take that.